hand you over to the session moderator for today. That is Paul Tilstone. Paul, over to you.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody, if you're based in the UK or whatever time you're joining us from around the world. My name is Paul Tilstone from Temoji. My role over the next 45 minutes is to ensure we facilitate an engaging conversation that keeps you in attention, and in the theme of the session that we're going to be talking through actually brings you added value for the 45 minutes that you're going to spend with us. Alex is not disappearing. She'll be working behind the scenes on the Q&A, which you can post into chat. And I've already seen somebody post and say hello from Berlin. If you're around the world in an exotic place, don't hesitate to let us know where you are, and let us know what you're thinking about the webinar and what questions we should be answering for you. So the theme of this webinar is around return on investment. The question is, are we measuring business travel ROI either the right way or even at all in any sort of metric? And looking at one of the stats from the 100, which is a research project we undertook at Temoji to interview 100 leading executives from suppliers in our industry, 93% of them say that they believe that ROI and the measurement and definition of ROI is highly important to the success of our industry going forward. So it's obviously a high priority for the supplier community. What we want to explore, though, during the course of this webinar is where the common ground lies and where any disconnect may lie between the traveller, the travel booker, the travel buyer, the TMC and the suppliers themselves, because ROI is a hot topic in our industry and there are sort of subsections of that topic. And those subsections that we're going to be looking at are cost, value and sustainability. We'll consider how they overlap and also how we can move closer to truly assessing ROI in corporate travel. Just a reminder, please post your questions or comments in the Q&A section, and just in case we get carried away throughout and don't get to answer them, either we've allocated some time at the end to come to some of those, or Alex has full authority to jump in and say, hang on a second, we've got a great question that relates to the topic that you're talking about. So before we begin, let's meet our panel. We've set them a challenge. We asked them to pick an object that to them represents ROI in corporate travel. And I'm going to kick us off. I have chosen a potato. Those eagle-eyed people amongst you will know that it is a sweet potato, but let's, for the sake of argument, say it's a potato, because that's all they had in Waitrose when I went. For me, this represents ROI because in 1586, Sir Francis Drake returned from an epic business trip with tobacco and potatoes. And I think the point here is that sometimes ROI is subtle, sometimes it is long-term, and sometimes it can benefit the indirect, not just the direct people who invest in the business trip. For example, who knew the humble potato would spawn 11,000 fish and chip shops and an industry worth 1.2 billion in the United Kingdom? So that's my piece. Let's go to our panel. Laura, you're up. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are quickly and then what your chosen object is?
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you, Paul. I'm Laura Saville. I'm the Head of Account Management for UK and Ireland for FCM Travel, and I have chosen my phone.
Okay.
Now, I think this represents ROI for me because it represents connectivity, access to information, the ability to work efficiently even when you are traveling. It's multi-purpose, you're always available, and I guess as the TMC, I see us a little bit as your app store. So we're there for clients to be able to access whatever they need to be able to generate their own ROI.
Love that. So it's efficiency, multimodal, and it's essentially your gateway to the world.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Carol, you're up next. Carol, it's the old thing. You're on mute.
Apologies.
That's all right.
I'm Carol, the Global Travel Manager for Fidelity, and I have chosen the Three Musketeers, which is the three people sitting behind me in my beautiful photograph of myself and my two daughters. They're the reason why I get up every day. They give me the energy, the motivation to do the things that I do. I wish I had a photograph of my grandchildren, because that is also worth every penny that I earn and I gain from what I do. So it's my Three Musketeers, my family. They are who make me who I am today.
So I love that for two reasons. One, because everything comes back to family and human beings, right? But secondly, because it's a reminder of when you say all for one and one for all, that ROI takes a team to bring it to life. Thank you, Carol. Jason?
Hello, my name's Jason Dunderdale, the Global Travel, Global Director of Sales, I should say, for Blacklane. So in true fashion, I didn't bring my item with me. However, I got my lovely wife to take a picture of it on the side. If you can all see that, it's a poker. Not because I'm a gambler. Let's make that clear. Although for those that do, please gamble responsibly. A poker chip to me represents business travel, because I always feel that business travel is a calculated bet. You're investing time, money, energy, but it's not about just what you gain from travel. It's what you can lose if you're not there. So, you know, at a poker table, if you're not sat down there, you're not going to win anything. So, you know, whether it's a deal, whether it's just building trust with somebody, I think that for me is the biggest representation for ROI.
I love that. Really good reminder that it's in ROI, there are winners and losers. It's not always an obvious win every single time. And of course, things can change on the trip that changes that dynamic as well. Sometimes you might have an ROI assessment and then something happens on the trip and it goes through the roof. Equally, something may change on the trip that takes it down. So great reminder. Thank you, Jason. Right, let's get into our first topic. Cost is king. So piece of research undertaken by Blacklane, and 67% of travellers say cost cutting has negatively impacted travel. Before we discuss this, Jason, is there any sort of context to this statistic? Because that's it's quite a stark statistic. So I'd just love to know if there's anything else.
Yeah, so it came out of the recent research that we did, and yeah, I mean, in the conversations that I have, for sure, I always hear that cost center is used a lot when we talk about travel, but I think it's, you know, we should really try and change it to talking about business travel as a profit center. The thing is with ROI, or business travel, when cost cutting starts to hit productivity, you're not saving, you're actually leaking value on there. So yeah, within that, you know, we found from the research that senior execs were losing up to 8 hours of lost time per trip. And that could be down to stress, lack of sleep, unreliable connections. We've all had misconnections when we're traveling for business. But then there's the other side of it as well. So 96% of executives told us that, you know, premium travel options actually boost their productivity. You know, when they're rested, when they're focused, and when they're able to work on the move as well, their impact whilst traveling, you know, increases significantly. You know, whether not just during the trip, but actually when they walk into the meeting, or maybe if they've been on a red eye and they get home and they've actually then got to do another 3-4 hours worth of work. So yeah, I think that cost still definitely matters for sure. We see that in all the conversations we have with our clients, but the ROI conversation for us is about you know, how smart investments in travel experience can lead to better outcomes, you know, not just for the business, but also for the client and for the individual as well.
The stat around travelers saying that premium travel boosts their productivity, they would say that, wouldn't they? I mean, I say it regularly to justify the fact I'm spending little wads of money on lovely business class seats, but you know, you've got to be able to measure it, haven't you? And I remember you and I spoke a couple of days ago about the lost productivity of a CEO and what an hour's worth of a CEO's time costs just in salary, not even in opportunity cost. Can you remember the figure?
Yeah, so I looked at it and just benchmarked it as an average CFO salary for a FTSE 100 company was approximately 500,000 a year, just to make it a round figure, make it nice and easy. That's breaking it down. So it's £20,000 a week, £500 an hour. So if you're saying that you're traveling, a typical C-level might travel 7 times a year. When you add all of that time up, the actual cost, and again, not talking about the opportunity, but the cost is 28,000, pounds per year, in lost time of productivity.
Great, good stat. Thank you very much. Carol and Laura, I guess when it comes down to it, cost is easily measurable, right? And kind of value is a little bit intangible and it's quite personal. And I just wonder, both as a TMC and as a buyer, I would imagine you're measured on cost quite a lot. I just wonder how this is sort of translating into TMC guidance and into the buyer value that you bring to your organization. Carol, first, can we just talk to kind of the objectives of your role and travel program, how it relates to cost and value?
Well, first of all, as a travel manager, I make it quite clear to the business heads that we're responsible for giving them a menu of suggestions. So this is what it means to you in terms of your cost and what's important to you. But they're responsible for making the decision. So in terms of what does value and the benefits mean to our travelers, we're not going to give them a Rolls-Royce service if it's not necessary to give them a Rolls-Royce service. But what we will do is put in front of them the facts. If you take that road, that's what it's going to cost you. If you take another road, that's what it's going to cost you. However, I think that we need to have a balanced view here. Yes, we are very cost conscious and we need to think about, what we spend, how we spend it. And, in balancing, that we get a seamless travel experience. However, I think sometimes the travelers have to be A, realistic, and B, take ownership of what benefits mean to them. So example, we put them in a business class seat, and we also offer the lounge facility, so they don't have that anxiety and they don't have that feeling of I'm rushing and I'm not being looked after. But then they don't use it because they book their cars 30 minutes before they're meant to get to an airport with an hour-long drive. They then get there, they're late, they're rushed, they're running through, they don't use the lounge, and then that becomes our fault. So we now need to think about how we educate our travelers to say, if you want this experience, wonderful experience, you need to also be accountable for yourself and make sure that there is better planning. The other thing that I would say is that, we spend hundreds and hundreds of pounds on an airline ticket, but I'm constantly being bashed over the head that our cars are too expensive. And you kind of think, if you put that into perspective, it is the whole journey, it's the whole experience. So I think the onus is on us to give them what they need to be able to have the experience that they're asking for, but they have to take accountability for themselves to A, recognize what's available to them and take advantage of that, and not make their bad planning become our responsibility. Now, I'm going to have a lot of travelers giving me a hard time over this, but I do believe that we need to take a balanced view.
I love that. Not let their bad planning become our responsibility. Of course, not every company works the same way, and so some companies are quite prescriptive on the class of travel and the cost of the trip. But I also love your point, what you've made about that first and last mile is often not thought about enough when it comes to productivity and value. And ultimately it can cost people a lot of time and kind of mess the trip up. So Laura, in your role in kind of as the intermediary between the customer and your services as a TMC, is cost a primary driver in negotiations with clients and the suppliers? Is it the only play in town? Like, what else is part of that QBR discussion?
Look, I think it's there's different things for different customers, right? We're looking after clients with all sorts of sizes, needs, policies. So it does differ depending on the customer. We've certainly, yes, got customers that are still very cost conscious, you know, and that is the driving factor. But there's others that, you know, sort of have really seen travel ramp up and they're spending because they see the benefit of that for, you know, securing new business. I think what we see across the board is everybody is wanting to optimize their travel budget. You know, and I think, you know, sort of to Jason's point earlier, I think what we are seeing is some clients who are really looking at how they can travel less, but travel well. So less trips, but then the people that are traveling are still able to have the same level of experience, you know, but that does mean the volume of trips has got to reduce. So that does mean that, you know, they're potentially looking at different approval levels to be allowed to travel in the first place, you know, and to be able to justify the trip for an ROI, to be able to then, you know, sort of travel on the type of trip that they want. But I also think that customers, you know, they're aware that a poor travel experience could impact their staff retention, you know, and acquiring new talent is time consuming and costly in its own right. So I think they are, you know, we are seeing a sort of balance all the time. You know, and also, like you say, when they're negotiating with suppliers, if they're traveling less, then their ability to negotiate on route deals, hotel rates, stuff like that is then harder. So they've got to get that spend level right. And that's where I think you're right. It's about achieving value from their program, and looking at, you know, optimizing the amount that they can spend rather than it just being cost. I don't know if you agree, Carol.
I totally agree. And I think the whole, I mean, our policy is, you know, stay longer, travel less, stay less, travel longer, stay less. No, travel less, stay longer. Yeah, got that right. Came out in the end. Yeah, and I think, you know, that the reason for that is obviously because of our sustainability targets, but also traveller well-being, enabled to sort of socialize and have a better experience with your either your clients or your team. And I also think that if we're doing a lot more of that, then your line manager is going to be a lot more lenient in terms of your experience, because you're investing more time for the company by being away, and because they're spending less money, they're going to say, okay, fine, that it's fine in business class, etc., etc. You can take a better car as opposed to just picking up the man round the corner, etc. So I think that, you know, there is a lot of benefits to thinking about, you know, what we do, how we do it, and then making sure that we're making the right choices, and we've got the right suppliers to give our travellers the experience they want. And also by diluting the number of suppliers you have, so allowing your staff to have the freedom to choose whoever they want to go with, it means that when you come to negotiate, it makes it a lot harder. If you have one or two suppliers that you say, I'm working with these suppliers, you're giving them the market share, then it makes that negotiation a lot better, and the rates can be a lot more competitive. So I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
So I love the insight across both of you, that the value equation is shifting when you're talking about traveling less but staying longer. You're talking and also what did you say, Laura? You said travel less but well. So then there's a potential shift in the premium experience. That means the cost of the trip goes up. Because you're staying longer, you're presumably getting more value out of the trip. So that equation is moving right in front of our eyes at the minute.
Absolutely.
And I also love the thought, Laura, about the onward cost impact. You know, I think when we think of business travel, we're probably guilty of thinking of it in isolation of what the cost of the trip and the immediate return is. But a bit like my potato and the indirect impact, it has a huge impact on travellers' well-being, their sense of responsibility and connection to the company and how they're treated. And I think we don't do ourselves a justice kind of going that deep on that. So I think for the first bit, what we've understand is that cost, it is a major factor. We're never going to get away from it. But that return, that value piece is sort of slightly intangible and difficult to measure. But there are definitely some considerations we should think about. Let's think about another cost though, different type of cost. Let's think about planet and sustainability. So in this particular stat, only 5% of travellers would choose a more sustainable travel option regardless of cost. Jason, give us some context on this one as well, because I must admit, I don't get this. It doesn't make any sense to me, but please enlighten us.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a stark statistic, and we definitely see that there's a gap between sustainability goals and still some traveller behaviour, and cost definitely is acting as a barrier. However, what we did also see is that when the cost increase is less than 10%, 43% of travellers will make the greener choice on there. And we've seen that shift, where, with some of our clients. So I think that it's really about, for us, we've been really focused on making sure that we're making it easier for clients to go green. And like I said, the demand is absolutely there. If you look at London, for an example, where, well, I mean, all over the place, we offer the greener alternative without any additional cost on there. But if you look at London, our increase in EV electric vehicle usage has increased significantly. I mean, we are now well over half of the rides in London are done in electric vehicles, without the client needing to pay anything more for it. And I think that should be something that as an industry, we really need to look at if we want to shift across to try and get to hit, net zero by 2050. Going green should be the default. It shouldn't be a compromise.
Yeah.
I'm right in thinking, and correct me if I'm wrong, that ordering an electric car is no difference in cost to the customer of Blacklane from ordering a regular car. Is that correct?
No, correct.
Right. So that's the bit I don't get, because I think when you look at like car hire, I get it, because car hire, you've got to work out where am I going to charge the vehicle? How much mileage have I got? And it's a hassle. But when you're ordering a chauffeur drive, this is a really easy way for companies to enter with a net zero policy without even worrying about it. You can make all of your chauffeur drive EV, assuming you've got the supply to cater for it, of course. But that's the kind of bit I don't get, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's something we should all be aspiring to do that. I mean, of course, supply is an issue in certain locations, and there are certain geographies where getting an electric vehicle, you're just not going to be able to get one.
I get that.
But obviously, where you can, you should be shifting towards that, because especially if there's no cost difference. For me, it's a no-brainer.
And when you compare it to what you can do in aviation or in hotel properties, at least the power's in your hands here. So I'm quite passionate about this. I'm sorry. Carol, how does this translate in the travel program, that choice between kind of cost and sustainability?
It's a difficult one. And I think firstly, organisations need to be very clear about the things that they're claiming and offering. As a buyer, we can only market and sell it if it's true and if it's available. So if it's not available, it makes it really hard to have a policy that says you choose this over that or that over that. So that's the first thing. And because of that and that lack of ability to do that, it then is left to the traveller to make a choice, because they're, and that choice is based on their knowledge and the little bit that we share with them. So I think it's really important that we get the support from the suppliers, and what they're saying and offering is authentic, and that we can do something and it is actual fact, and it's not gloss and marketing. So that's the other thing. And I think, it's from an organization perspective, we as a company or our leaders have to decide, is it cost or is it providing a sustainable program? So what does our policy say? My policy says cheapest on the day. Is it going to be the cheapest sustainable offering on the day? And unless we make that distinction, we're leaving it again to choice. And as your stats show, it's a very small percentage of people that are actually taking this where it should be. So I think that we need the support from the suppliers in order to market and deliver the offering and the messaging. And we need the organizations to be very clear about what the policy is and the statement that they're making. If that doesn't happen, of course, we're not going to get to where we need to be. So that's, from my take, that's what we need to do.
Yeah, I like the shift from cheapest to cheapest sustainable. It's just one word, but it makes all the difference on the selection, right? So, and to your point about just making sure all the greenwashing is removed from the sector, so we can actually make proper viable choices. Laura, let me ask you a question, but just before we do that, can we pop up the next slide? Because we, in our 100, when we interviewed these 100 supplier leaders in our industry, only 21% of them actually believed that we're going to hit net zero by 2050. 45% said no, and 35% were unsure. And that worries me. So, Laura, what can we do, especially in the TMC role, when you're in that kind of intermediary position between the suppliers and their offering and the buyers and their policy and behaviours? What should we be doing differently? How can the TMC play a role to maybe educate and move this along?
Look, I think you're right. I think there's a lot to be done. And I think education is where we can support. I think to Carol's point, we need that direction as to what decision that company has made. Like, is it cost but sustainable? Because then we can help in terms of things like visibility in the online booking tools around helping empower travellers to make the right choice. But I think for us to be able to support and do that, we need to know what that decision is. Yes, there are things that we can do within the booking flow to be able to highlight easily the greener choices that are available to travellers, and even, using technology to actively encourage them to take those choices, even if they aren't the cheapest. But that has got to come on alongside the direction of the customer, that's what they want. I think with the speed of change of the use of AI in our sector, this could be really critical in how we help deliver on this type of thing in the future. But I think in the short term, in very much the same way as we as the TMCs work with risk management companies to provide reporting for duty of care, I think we need to be open to working with any supplier that our customers are working with to be able to share their travel data, to allow them to have data, to have knowledge around their carbon, because that's the sort of thing they're going to need to then ultimately make the decisions that Carol's talking about.
Yeah. I like the AI as a potential solution for sustainability, crunching all that powerful data to bring us the right solution. Of course, AI brings its own sustainability challenges, but we'll sort of gloss over that momentarily. And that shared travel data is really important. Jason, I'm going to come to a question from Ishmael Tahir. He says, what lessons can we learn from, I'm going to say the company name because it was well publicised, Hertz's EV struggles. And it maybe we've touched on it a little bit, but I think it goes back to kind of making it easy to make greener choices and trying to ensure that travellers are making those decisions. Any sort of lessons we can learn from Hertz?
I think with that one specifically, I don't know what planning went in behind that, but there has to be a significant change in behaviors if you're transitioning from, an internal combustion engine vehicle to an EV. And that doesn't just have to be taken into account from a rental side for the actual renter. It has to be by the company itself. A lot of the challenges they had were specifically around, the depreciation cost. See, that's a little bit out of their control. I think that the market that they chose to do it in is also very challenging in North America, and makes it very, very difficult, with EV ownership there. But then, some of the stories I heard, getting vehicles that, people were renting vehicles and they weren't fully charged, for example. There is some forward planning that needs to, you need to take into account, when you're looking to enter into any type of EV ownership, which is what we've done with, a lot of our chauffeurs, is making sure that we, that they're prepared for the rides that they're doing, that the cars are have sufficient charge, etc., so that there isn't that gap, or there isn't the experience isn't any less than what it would be with a more traditional mode of transportation.
Okay, great. Thank you for that question, Ishmael. As our first person submitting a question, you win a prize. It is a sweet potato. I'll pop that in the post to you. So if you can drop us your address privately, and I will do it. Okay, we've got a hard stop in 14 minutes because this is running away with us. So if you do have any other questions, please drop them in the Q&A and I will go out and buy a whole bag of potatoes if I have to. Let's just bring it kind of round to this question of ROI in business travel. So going back to that stat, that 93% of the leaders we interviewed say ROI measurement is key. And I think that there is some natural misalignment on cost, sustainability and the ROI metric. So like, how do we intend to get an accurate measure in terms of ROI? Because it sort of requires that holistic view of cost to the company, cost to people, cost to the planet, and then like, what do you get back and is it fully tangible? So Carol, how do you view this kind of ROI concept within your travel program? And I guess, Laura, I'd be interested to follow on from Carol's answer on the difference, maybe a different approach to ROI measurements you see across your client base. So Carol, you first.
I think ROI means different things to different people. So, you know, you can almost throw it back to your supplier and say, well, what are you looking to get as a return? And vice versa. I think it starts from the very first conversation that you have with your supplier, because it's about the service and delivery that they're going to bring and what that means to them. So in terms of your scope and what you're asking for, and that's assuming that we're going in and understanding what it is that we want in the first place. Once we determine that, it's really, really important to say, how do we measure that delivery? One of the things I've found that people really forget about, and having going through, you know, I'm currently going through a TMC, they forget about the people, which is the most important part of the whole program. And they forget to talk about those people and how are those people going to work with you. They're the most important things for me. You know, who is it that you're bringing into my house? And how are we going to operate and work together? Because that's the return in as far as I'm concerned, of my investment. If they cannot deliver, if we cannot have the right relationships and they cannot meet the services and the requirements that we've asked for, I'm not interested in how many lovely bits of whistles and bells you have, because without the people supporting you with that, it's never going to happen. So for me, it means different things to different people. It's about the first conversation you have with your supplier or the people that you're operating with. It's about aligning what is important to you and then looking at your supplier and saying, can you deliver, and will you get a return in terms of having a relationship with me? It is not a one-sided conversation. We've told you what we want, but I don't have the right to say to you, you have to deliver on that, and that's how I'm going to measure you. What I have to say to you or ask is, based on what I'm asking for, can you do this? And how can you demonstrate to me that that's what you're going to be delivering, and I'm going to be happy with the service that you're providing? So that's what ROI means to me. And I think that's, as an industry, is how we should always look at it. That whole partnership, that whole holistic view, and align it to your culture and appetite versus the supplier's culture and appetite.
So one thing you've picked up on there is, I think there are two ROI conversations here. There's the ROI of the trip itself, and there's the ROI of proactively managing the function of travel, and therefore the role of the TMC or the OBT or whatever it might be. So Laura, I guess, how do you follow on from that?
Yeah, look, I think I've probably come at it in my thinking on coming the other way, like you say, so the ROI of the trip, and looking at what our customers are saying to us around, you know, how do they measure that? But I still think it comes back to people in some ways with some of our organisations, for sure. And I think what we are seeing is that for many, you know, they are looking at, you know, the return on investment is around their traveller satisfaction, and they are, you know, looking to use measurements like CSAT scores to gauge the traveller sentiment as a measure of the success of their programme. But for others, it's about, you know, trying to be able to speak to their key stakeholders around, you know, sort of travel spend as a percentage of their overall business turnover, you know, and how does that spend directly connect to the overall results of their business? And actually, you know, if they didn't travel at all, would their profits go down? And if they did, therefore that puts a value on the cost of the travel that they're doing. You know, and so those conversations change slightly in terms of the cost of the travel as a percentage of their overall turnover, rather than just seeing it in isolation. And that for us means understanding the industry of the customers that we work with. You know, is travel a direct or an indirect spend? You know, and how does that work within their organisation? Look, there are other things too that our customers measure success on, and therefore ROI, you know, and it is, you know, look, we're in a world of much more geopolitical instability, and, you know, there is elements and, you know, of risk and liability that I think go into that piece that Carol was talking around about why have a managed program and the ROI of a managed program, because I think businesses have that, you know, need and responsibility to protect and, you know, sort of themselves and their employees, but I think they also need to be able to respond quickly, adapt policy, you know, sort of in an ever shifting environment. And look, I think for many, you know, success looks like a program that is moving forward and evolving, you know, bringing in new technology or content streams that means the whole program is smoother. That is a bit harder to measure though. You know, how that success looks is harder. You know, and I know certainly what we would try and do is then make sure we've got a strong collaborative business plan, to mean that, you know, we're at least setting clear goals and ensuring that we're achieving them, holding each other to account to do that through the life cycle of that contract, to mean that actually we can show progress over the term of our relationship with our customers. You know, look, in an industry which is, you know, it is fragmented, you know, I think success is about how can we help you know, our customers make something that can feel quite complex as simple as possible.
Absolutely, and that's the point I'm making about both sides having an ROI.
Yeah.
But you have to work in that partnership,
yeah,
understand each other, and then come to some sort of way of making that happen, and then seeing those measurements work and unfold. So even in terms of technology and anything that you introduce, if you have that relationship, by default, those things will happen. If
Absolutely.
you understand the culture, you will bring to the table the things that align with that culture. So I think, as I said, it's different in all, as you've said, Laura, it's different in each company.
Yeah, of
People are
course.
looking for different things, but I think the key thing, going back to what I said, is that first conversation.
Yes.
That will determine what's important.
I love the principle of the correlation between travel spend and revenue, or even travel spend and sales success for the year. I wonder how many companies go back and actually measure that. I've actually not heard of that many doing it. And of course, the piece about fragmentation is it makes this so much harder. That's the problem, in order to really kind of measure ROI effectively.
Yeah.
We've had another person who's interested in the sweet potato, Jennifer Murray. She asked about how people are measuring CO2, and Ishmael talks about suppliers and the metrics of CO2. So Jason, I'm going to sort of twist the next question a little bit to play to that, which is whose responsibility is it to measure and judge ROI? And within that, these questions around CO2, how effective do you think we are at kind of getting the right metrics and being able to incorporate CO2 into that ROI measurement?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I think overall, we, you know, measuring the ROI ultimately, in my opinion, it's down to the consumer, right? So in this case, you know, the corporate client, and we need to help to, you know, from our point of view, what we need to be doing is trying to help the narrative and to change that conversation internally from how much did we spend to actually what did we gain and what did we cost if we didn't travel. And I think there are some basic questions that we can ask with that. You know, it's, you know, did the trip enable a better business outcome? Did that, you know, did it help the traveler be more productive? Did it make them feel more connected, and do they trust it? And then, you know, did the actual travel happen with the least friction and footprint as possible? I guess where we come in is helping, you know, what are the tools and what are the bits of data that we can give to, you know, Carol and to Laura for her clients, for example, that can help them with those internal questions, those internal conversations. In terms of the CO2, you know, I think that across the board, the industry is getting better But you know, I still think we have a long way to go, and I think that alignment across the industry is really where we need to get to. And we talk about as an industry that we collaborate in so many ways, but then we're also seen to be, you know, at loggerheads with each other and have competing principles that we want to try and, you know, follow or use when we look at, you know, CO2 and alignment. You know, I mean, I don't even want to bring it up in this too much, but I mean, look at NDC as an example, right? But I'll say no more on that one. But I guess, you know, Carol, Laura, I mean, is there anything that suppliers can do to kind of enable those conversations to give you the ammunition when you go back to your stakeholders and ask, you know, and talk about certain categories of travel? Is there specific data or tools that can help give you the right narrative?
And we need 30 seconds each because we're approaching the 45 very quickly.
For me, the data, just being able to provide the facts and the data to demonstrate, you know, the differences. I think a lot of people look at it in terms of the cost, which we've been talking about, but it's also highlighting the value and the benefits of change. That would be what I would need to be able to market it and communicate it to my users.
And I'm going to say I agree with Carol because I do. And we're short on time, I know, Paul.
I guess just a quick yes or no, and maybe a one-liner on this. Do you think that we should be heading towards really defining ROI in sort of monetary terms and communicating that to travellers, or do you think it's just too intangible and it's going to be a sort of gut feel? So have we got to be more precise on this? Jason first.
Yeah, I think we do need to, but to Carol's point, ROI means different to different people.
Yeah. Okay.
What we need to have is some kind of alignment, almost like, you know, this is kind of like the benchmark, and then other people have their, you know, what their interpretation of it is as well. But
okay.
Yes, I do think we should be.
Great. Laura?
Yes, I agree with Jason too. I think it's hard because I think it means something personally to even the individual, not even the corporate. But I think, you know, helping them, give them clarity as to what those decisions should, you know, the decisions they should be making based on what's best for their company and how they view value, be that carbon or, you know, sort of cost. I think it's important that we help them make the right choices.
Okay, great. Carol, 30 seconds.
Yes, and just quickly, what's on offer? Just tell them what's on offer. That gives them the opportunity to make those choices. So
give them a kind of framework to work in, and then give them choices, and that's
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess the primary thing is make sure that the ROI is linked to the overall corporate objectives.
Yeah.
So stay in contact with that as well. Brilliant. Yeah. Thank you very much to all three of you and to those that submitted questions. Alex, back to you just to close up and wrap the webinar.
Thank you. I hope that everyone's enjoyed that. We've got some key resources available online. So Paul and Jason referenced throughout there a few of the travel surveys that we've been conducting. All of these are available at blacklane.com or Temoji. So have a look on there. And thank you everybody for attending. Thank you to our wonderful panelists. Thank you to Blacklane for asking Temoji to support in this. And thank you very much to our audience for joining us. If you have any additional questions, reach out to the Blacklane team and they'll be more than happy to help. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
Potatoes are on the way.